Hello everybody and welcome back to the Human Echoes recap for Better Call Saul Season 2, Episode 5. This one's called Rebecca, and if last episode was a really Mike-centric episode, and we had a lot of action with him and sort of Saul off in the background, this episode is the Kim episode. I hope it's not the only one, because Kim is awesome in this. We don't start off with her. We start off with a flashback, which, I mean, right off the bat, it's this really fascinating moment because you see Chuck screwing a light bulb in, like changing light bulbs in this chandelier, and my first instinct was maybe this is him, like, now, but having gotten better. Maybe he's getting over his fear, maybe he's got some kind of medication or something that's letting him deal with his fear of electricity. But no, it is a flashback. We see, because he's with this other woman who we don't know. I think the title of the episode refers to her, but I didn't actually catch her name. And he's with her. He's talking about, this symphony that she plays violin in. He's talking about somebody coming over. Hey, give him a chance. And, she's cooking food for them. And you see that Chuck has it all. He has everything. And it's a great contrast, even more so from, looking at where he is now, you can just say, like, wow, this guy, living in the dark, having to have people bring him stuff, just cut off from society in a way. But this, knowing that he used to be married, or at least have some significant other he was really, really comfortable with, knowing that he had everything in life, and lost all that, that makes the Chuck that we know now even more kind of tragic. He's this guy who, now we can look at him as like, okay, he still has a nice house, he still has tons of money, great, he doesn't have to have electricity, but what has he really lost? And now we see, he's lost, for one way or another, he's lost his wife, or the woman that he loves, and he's lost this great life where he's a part of all this stuff, so right off the bat, even before Jimmy shows up, you have this great moment of sort of storytelling depth and clarity that brings in a whole nother layer to Chuck, which is important because he's an important part of the end of the episode too. And really, Chuck is such a great character in Better Call Saul because of, much like Hamlin in the first season, you want to hate him, but you don't really have a great reason. He said some mean things to Jimmy, but he had good reasons to say those mean things to Jimmy. And he wasn't wrong about any of the mean things that he said to Jimmy. So it's this really interesting high wire tightrope act that they walk with this character, keeping him where you don't like him. You're very much unsettled by him. You can't really get behind the guy. But on the other hand, logically, he's not the bad guy at all. So, but we do see so Jimmy shows up. It's clear that he's just gotten into town. He's just gotten settled in, working in the mailroom at HHM. This is, very much in the past where Jimmy's fleeing from himself and trying to help Chuck out, or, to redeem himself with Chuck. And Chuck has sort of built up Jimmy as someone who's going to cause trouble. He says to his wife, if it's a problem and you need to have a high sign or whatever, just tug on your earlobe and I'll say something and we'll get rid of it or whatever. But Chuck's wife really likes Jimmy. She really hits it off, and Jimmy starts telling all of these awful lawyer jokes. Just one right after another, and she's laughing, and Chuck is sitting there like really uncomfortable, and he keeps going. The great thing about this scene is how much Jimmy just keeps piling it on and piling it on. Oh, this is another good one. This is the last one, but this one's great. And just keeps going like 6 or 7 jokes in, and you're thinking, sheesh, lay off. But he's found his niche, right? He's found the thing that's making somebody laugh, and he can tell maybe he feels a little uncomfortable, and he thinks that if he can make Chuck's wife laugh, maybe Chuck will be happy. And Chuck's sitting there like tugging on his ear, giving his wife the high sign. She's not even paying attention, just like loving it. She jumps in with a lawyer joke of her own. And we flash forward just a little bit to after Jimmy's gone, and they're laying in bed, and this whole scene is really, really starkly lit, which is part of the reason why I thought maybe it was sort of Chuck in the present day, and he was just putting some light bulbs in, but it wasn't quite all set up. But no, it's definitely in the past. I don't know if the lighting choice was sort of to give us a sense of time, similar to how they had the black and white for the past segments, or the future segments for Jimmy, who is now Saul, who is now, I forget what his future name is when he's relocated to Nevada or wherever he is, or North Dakota. But I think that it was a stylistic choice to sort of set us in a different time period, so we wouldn't, when we jump forward to the present day, we would know, okay, now we're in the real world. But Chuck's sitting there, and you can tell he's kind of bothered, and his wife says, oh, well, he wasn't that bad. And Chuck tries to tell a lawyer joke. And it's a good joke. It really is. But his wife just doesn't connect. She's not paying attention. His timing's just a little bit off. And she says, oh, huh. And you can tell that bothers him. You can tell that, man, there's a part of him that envies Jimmy, which is something I don't think we've ever seen before. We've never seen a scenario where Chuck wants to be Jimmy. And you can really tell, oh, there's a part of him that wishes that he could be like his brother. As much as he despises him, as much as he thinks that he's a ne'er-do-well and all this stuff, he really does admire Jimmy's ability to sort of just click with people, and he can't do that as well. But then we get into the meat of the episode, and we start off with Jimmy meeting his, for lack of a better word, babysitter. He's on thin ice at Davison, Maine, and this great actress at being annoying on purpose. I assume, hopefully she's not like this in real life. But she is so, like, she comes up and she has some, like, I have some notes for you on the style guide. You use too many quotation marks in here, and it shows that you might not be confident in your own arguments if you quote too many other people's arguments. And has just this amazing affect where you can see that she's trying to be helpful, that she's not a bad person. She's a good upstanding lawyer, but you can also tell how Jimmy's going to have a problem with this. Jimmy wheedles his way out of the situation, makes his escape, and runs off to find Kim, who is stuck down in the documents room at HHM. And he says, he's called her already. He's called her up and said, hey, I've got great news. I'm going to get you out of this. Because he thinks he's the one who got her into it. And he is, because he ran that commercial without permission. But he thinks it's because of Chuck. He goes to her and he says, I'm going to file a lawsuit. You're going to file a lawsuit against HHM. It's some kind of employment discrimination or whatever. He doesn't really go into the details, but he has some scheme. And even as a novice viewer, you look at that and you're like, no, that's a terrible idea. And Kim says to him, that's a terrible idea. First of all, even if I won, which is a giant if, going up one lawyer against an entire law corporation, even if I was to win, it would be complete career suicide. There's no scenario where this is a good plan. And then Jimmy pulls out his other trump card. He says, well, okay, I'll quit then. I'll quit Davison, Maine, and then Chuck will be happy, because he's still operating on this assumption that Chuck is punishing him by putting Kim in documents. And we don't have proof of that. And we don't get definitive proof one way or the other in this episode, but it does really shift the narrative as we go along towards the idea that Jimmy's not correct here. Jimmy thinks that Chuck is punishing him, but actually it's more of Howard. Howard, is upset that he was made to look like a fool, and he's taking that out on Kim because, and Chuck at the very end of the episode talking to the Kim says, look, Jimmy pulls everybody down with him, and Howard feels like he's been pulled down. So he's not he's not happy about that, and the only way he can react is to mitigate the link, to take out the link between Jimmy and him, and that's to put Kim in documents. Probably. There's still the possibility that it's somewhat Chuck's doing, but that possibility is a lot more shaky now. But Kim has a great moment in this scene, and this is really where the episode turns and becomes her episode, because she looks at Jimmy and she says, "You're not going to get me out of this mess. I'm going to get me out of this mess. All right? I can handle it. You buzz off. Go do your thing, because everything you touch turns to crap. I can dig my way out of this hole." And for most of the rest of the episode, we see her working really hard to get out of the hole. She puts her head down. She does as much in documents as she can. And during the day, every spare moment that she has, she doesn't have an office anymore. She can't make the calls in the documents room. So she's on the stairwell. She's in the bathroom. She's in the parking lot, making calls, making contacts, trying to net HHM a big enough client in a way that will hopefully ingratiate her back to the law firm, to prove her worth to them, that it's not just that she had, the sandpiper thing, and it's not that just that she went back to bat for Jimmy, but that she's a really legitimately good lawyer. And it's a long sequence, and it plays out over a bunch of different sort of locales and stuff, but it's really, really effectively shot. The editing is fascinating. We see her, you can tell she's like putting up these Post-it notes on the window just in the stairwell, sitting there on the phone talking to people. You don't know who any of these people are, but you get the idea that she's like putting on as much of a happy face as she can, saying, "Hey, we met at this place. Are you interested in any legal representation for your giant company?" And to see her jump into that chameleon role when you can tell that she's beat down and just crushed by the weight of everything that she's having to deal with Jimmy, with being stuck in the documents room, with the lack of sleep, just overworking, like that just makes Kim so much of a hero in this episode. And the great thing is she pulls it off. She actually does get someone to come and take on HHM as as new legal counsel with some new case that they have, and like $250,000 agreements or whatever that's going to be bringing in money to the company. And you see Howard go and tell Chuck, and they're celebrating, and he brings over alcohol and everything, and he tells him, "Hey, Kim brought this to me. She snagged this, this big contract." And Chuck says, "Oh, so I guess she's out of the document room out of then." And Howard says, "We'll see." Because there was a great, I guess I'm going out of order here, but the buildup was so tense. You had Kim, you really got the sense that she's hustling, she's trying, she's just hacking away at this problem any way that she can. She's determined not to be put down by this. She's determined that this is not going to be her end, that Slippin' Jimmy is not going to, mess her up, and she still likes, Jimmy McGill, but she's going to dig herself out of the situation, and it looks really promising. She finally gets that call where the person calls back and says, "Oh yeah, hey, I do remember you. I liked you. We had a connection." And she says, "Yes, great. We'll set it up." And then we see the meeting happen, and she's standing there with Howard Hamlin, like right next to the guy whose name is on the firm, meeting these other two lawyers, and they come in and they shake hands and everything smiles. And then she says, "So I guess I'll take care of that billing, that case then," or whatever. And he says, "Yeah, I'll have somebody else do it. You're busy down in documents." And it's just, it's super crushing. It's this moment of like, you've seen her get what she wanted. She triumphed. She made it to this almost impossible goal where she got them she proved her worth. And Howard's like, "Nah, yeah, I'm not sure about you yet." And it's just this, huge crash of, you see that happen, and your heart breaks for her, because you've been with her on this journey to claw her way out of this place, and now all of a sudden she's just back at square one. It didn't matter, and you think, like, is nothing gonna help? And at the close of the episode, you see her talk to Chuck. He asks her, he's come in really early in the morning trying to get some work done, doesn't want to disrupt the whole firm by turning off all the electricity, but wants to be able to work, which is interesting seeing his character progress that way too, because he's trying to get back into the life of being a lawyer, even with his crazy limitations. And she's there burning the midnight oil way into the morning. He's coming in way early, so their paths intersect. He asks for some coffee, and she sits down and has coffee with him and just bluntly says, "Do I have a future here?" And it's great to see her level like that. Not only with, I mean, it's with, first of all, a senior partner in the law firm, but with Chuck, where she's heard all this stuff from Jimmy, and she's discounted that to a certain extent, but you also have to know that somewhere in her head, she's wondering, is that the problem? Is it Jimmy that's causing this? And Chuck, rather than just saying yes or no, and tells her this story about how when they were back in Cicero, their father had this corner drugstore, or corner, just, sort of five and dime store that he had dreamed of owning his entire life. And he employed Jimmy for a while, and Chuck, as the business began to fail, went there and was doing the books and checking things out, and he saw that there had been $14,000 that had been pilfered out of the accounts throughout the years, and pinned it on Jimmy and said, "Hey, Dad, Jimmy's doing this," and their dad would not believe them. His dad said, "No, I don't believe that Jimmy would do that." And he makes this point about how Jimmy is not a bad guy, but the choices that he makes and his core being sort of makes him unable to do the right thing in the long run. He does believe that the ends justify the means, and the tragic end of that story is that their dad ends up dying like 6 months after he loses the store. Maybe, you could argue maybe not because of that, but there's certainly in Chuck's mind that idea is there, that it's Jimmy's fault. Jimmy's the reason that their dad lost his dream of being his own boss 6 months before he died. And it really does ring true, partly because we know that this is true of Jimmy. We know that Jimmy has these issues, that he is drawn to the dark side, for lack of a better word, that he is drawn to the more dishonest lines of work. And even when he's doing the honest thing, he's still doing the dishonest thing to do the honest thing. And it ends up dragging down all the people around him. And he says to Kim, "It's not your fault. You just got caught in his tidal pull. That's just how Jimmy is. He's not a bad guy, but he does wreck people's life. He wrecked, he made Howard feel like a fool. He ended up wrecking your, situation." And then he says, "I'll talk to Howard, and I'll try to get him to bring you out of the documents office." And for me, that basically says this is not personal, really, because we see this perspective from Chuck, and even though still we don't love him, even though he's not going to be our favorite character, they really do sort of drive another nail in the side of, hey, Chuck's just a dude. He's just a human being. He's a decent person. He follows the rule of law. He's not perfect. He can be a bit of a dick sometimes, but he's also not out to get Jimmy. Jimmy came to him with that accusation, and he didn't shoot it down when Jimmy came to him, I think probably because he didn't think there was any point. But maybe he did shoot it down and Jimmy just didn't listen. I don't remember exactly how that went down. But point being, Chuck says to Kim, I'm not out to hurt Jimmy. I don't want him to see bad things. I just don't want to see the law drag through the mud, which is what Jimmy is going to do if he's let to keep going. And that just really cemented sort of again, the balance that Chuck has here of as this great character that you can't really get 100% behind, but you can't hate him logically because he's right. And as if we needed proof of that more, Jimmy goes to his old haunts at the courthouse. He's trying to get a date for something with something that Davis and Maine is working on. Sees Mike with the busted up eye. He has his babysitter with him, and he says to the babysitter, not literally a baby, the younger sort of perky, way insistent law firm partner, says to her, just let me handle this. The clerk of court here knows me. I know how to deal with her. Just let me talk my way into this. And he's trying to get a favorable date for the judge that he wants. And she talks him, he says clearly he's aiming for this early Thursday morning date because he thinks this judge gets sloshed later in the afternoon. He doesn't want to have to deal with that. And the receptionist, the attendant there, whatever, she's pushing him back in the afternoon, and he pops out of his bag. He says, "Oh, by the way, I've got one of these for you." And you see her smile, and then the babysitter pops in, and she's like, "No!" Just like the most forceful. This woman has to have some kind of lack of social understanding not to be able to handle this stuff in a slightly more tactful way, but she just comes out and says, "You can't give her that. That's a bribe." And he says, "No, it's a gift. Get off my back. It's just a Beanie Baby. She likes Beanie Babies. We're about to get the court date that we want." And she just puts her foot down in her incredibly perky and annoying way and says, "We're not doing that." So Jimmy is understandably downtrodden. And he goes into the restroom there at the courthouse. There's a great moment between him and the babysitter. He's like, "I need to go to the men's room." And she follows along after him. And he says, "It's the men's room. Give me 5 inches of space, woman." So she does. She backs off. He goes in there and he sees one of the lawyers who works at the courthouse. One of the not pro bono, but public defender type lawyers who he had worked with, I think we saw in season 1. And the guy knows that he's had a change in fortune. He knows that he's been at this nice law firm. And he starts asking him all these questions about "Oh, wow, did they give you a company car?" And Jimmy's like, "Yeah, they gave me a company car." He's like, Did they give you a corporate apartment?" He's like, "Yeah, they gave me a corporate apartment." "Do you have an office with a window?" "Yeah, I have an office with a window." "And a perky assistant?" "Well, it's a guy named Omar." And a great moment where he's like, "Omar." I love the way he delivered that line of reading of Omar. Perky dude, perky lady or foreign dude. I'll take either one, really. But it's a great scene, a little bit comedic, but also hammering home the fact that Jimmy has it made in the shade. He's got everything he ever wanted. He used to be this guy, and he used to be looking at people who are like him now and thinking, "Oh man, I wish I could be them, And he's not happy. He's not happy. He has everything that he could possibly want, and he's not happy. And this scene just cements that into place so well for us, because when things inevitably go bad, when Jimmy inevitably tanks Davis and Maine, leaves them, either does something to on purpose to lose his job, or just leaves. And Kim mentions it to him too, because he offers to leave Davis and Maine, and she says, "Oh well, great sacrifice, you leaving the place that you obviously don't want to work, dude." But it's so great because we know that his fear of them is irrational. He's in the place where he wanted to be, and he can't be happy. He can't be happy because he really has to work on his own. That's how Jamie McGill works. That's how Saul Goodman's going to work. And you can see the seeds of that being planted, I think, and it's great for us, the audience, but it's also sort of interesting because it shows Jimmy a little bit, what do you want? It asks, I think that there's a question being asked of him in this scene. He sees this guy, he's reminded that he has all of this stuff, and he's reminded that he's not happy, and he has to ask himself the question, what can I do? What is it that I want? What will make me happy? And I think that the gears are turning in his head, that the stuff isn't what matters to him. What matters is being sort of a maverick and being able to do his own thing and write his own rules. And that's going to be part of the impetus towards sending him, even further into the Saul Goodman territory. Our final scene we get is between Jonathan Banks, what's this character's name? Mike. Brain fart. It's between Mike, and he's sitting in this coffee, breakfast place. I'm going to say it's a Waffle House. It's not a Waffle House, but I'm pretending it's a Waffle House. Sitting in a Waffle House type place, eating his breakfast, talking on the phone with his daughter-in-law. They're staying at a hotel with a pool, and he's telling her, oh, don't worry about the money. Go take her out to eat. It's all good. Because of, he did manage to get the money to at least be able to handle putting them up for a little while. Hopefully they'll be able to find an apartment, but he's very clearly happy, feeling like he's accomplished his goal. And then, what's his name? Tito, I think. Not Nachos. Tuco's uncle from Breaking Bad walks in and speaks, which is, we've never seen him speak, and we've never seen him walk. In all of Breaking Bad, he was in that wheelchair, he was ringing the bell, he was, that was all he could ever do. And here he comes walking in and sits down by Mike and says, he introduces himself, says, hey, I'm the uncle of the young man that punched you a lot, and that was wrong, and he shouldn't have done that, and he has no respect. But, man, 8 years is a long time, isn't it? For him to go to jail. Wouldn't it be great if you, say, took the blame for having the gun on you? Yeah, and then he wouldn't have to go away as long, and you're an ex-cop, so they'll probably let you go for the illegal gun thing. What do you say, bud? And Mike, of course, is like, he's in a rock and a hard place, because Tito doesn't suspect, I don't think, right now, that Mike set up his son. He doesn't think, it's possible he knows. It's possible that Tuco told him everything that went down and he believed him. But the way we're playing it right now, he doesn't suspect. So Mike has gotten this money from Nacho, a substantial sum of money from Nacho, to make Tuco go away. And now Tuco's people are coming to Mike and saying, you probably shouldn't make him really go away for that long. And now Mike's caught between two opposing forces, because on the one hand, if he does what Tito wants him to do, he's screwed over Nacho, and Nacho's not going to be happy, and Nacho's coming for him. If he doesn't, then Tito's going to be coming after him with the whole force of Tuco's family, and we've seen what kind of people those are, and Mike knows what kind of people those are. So I'm interested. I think this is going to be the catalyst that bring Mike and Jimmy back together. I think that this is what's going to get them working together again, because Mike is going to have to go to Jimmy and say, listen, I need some lawyer help. This is where I'm at. How can we finesse this so that it works the best way, where it looks like I'm working with both people, but I'm not? That's my guess. Because if that's the only thing I can think of that he can do to get out of the situation. But we'll have to wait and see. All in all, I loved this episode. I loved Ray and her struggle and her fight, and how much she puts up with, and how complex her character was. It was really great to see her say to Jimmy, I'm going to do this on my own, and then do it on her own. We haven't seen her get out of the documents room yet, but I feel confident that at the moment, things are going to be looking up for her. I thought that she was just screwed, but to see her come back in this way, to see her have this great hero moment of, this is my time, I made this mess, and I am going to clean it up, and no matter how many sleepless nights, and no matter how many hours in the document room, and how many fruitless phone calls I have to make, this is going to improve, and it's going to be me that improves it, and not you, Jimmy. Man, it was great. I was pumping my fist for her. I was like, you go, girl! Whoop, whoop! Kim's the best! Kim's the best! Whoop, whoop! So, looking forward to seeing how all of that plays out again, and especially now that we have if we know that Jimmy probably isn't married to Kim in the future. We know he mentions in Breaking Bad he has 2 ex-wives. We don't know exactly how all that plays out in between here in Breaking Bad, but the odds are good that the relationship does not last. And I think that really making us sympathize with Kim in this episode is going to give us a great basis for when this finally falls apart, not to have one side or the other. People talked, and I think it was wrong, but there was a lot of people that had a problem with Skyler in Breaking Bad because she didn't support Walt in his evil drug dealing, killing people schemes. And you understand that Walt was the hero of the show and people are going to empathize with him to a certain degree, but it's really unfair to say that Skyler was not, she's not the one in the wrong in Breaking Bad, and for sure Kim is not the one in the wrong here, but you didn't want to see her fall into the trap of maybe you don't empathize with her as much. And this episode, I think, was a great brick in the wall of, okay, we don't want to, eventually her and Jimmy are going to break, but we don't want it to look like that it's all Kim and she's the bad one, because it's clear that that's not the case. So yeah, excited to see what's happening going forward. We're halfway through the season now, I believe. Stick around for next week. We will be recapping again with another episode of the Human Echoes recap of Better Call Saul.